Okay. Wow. Is this a big section, guys? Seriously, like, this is going to run long. Tax reform highlights is the title that the book gives to this section. And of course, you know, I teach the book. What we're going to do is start off right here. We're going to understand that, look, in 1862, Lincoln passed a temporary income tax. I think it was 3% or something, 5% for the top. And then that got struck down in 1894. And then in 1913, finally, the income tax was written into the Constitution with an amendment, and it's been here ever since. So look at this chart. This starts in 1913, and you can see again, we're talking about a 5% tax rate back in 1913. And then in order to pay for World War I, we see that the tax rate on the top 1%, this is the richest 1% of Americans' tax rate. This is not the average tax rate. This is not all Americans. This is the richest 1%. This is corporations, okay? And then I really don't know what the blue line is. So to pay for World War I, the tax rate goes all the way up into the 70s. 75% of every dollar that the richest Americans made after a certain number, I don't know what that number was, 500,000, a million, something like that, would go straight to the government, okay? But then after the war and through the 20s, we see this number fall back down to about 25%. This is now World War II, and the number gets as high. Check this out, everyone. The richest Americans were paying 95% of every dollar they made after the $1 million or $2 million bucks or something to the federal government to help pay the bills in World War II. The rich really stepped up. In both World War I and World War II, they footed the bill for these wars. And it makes sense because these people could afford it. And this is only after your millionth buck. So, you still made $1 million this year and you're getting taxed at a much lower percent. But then after $1 million, that money, do you really need it? Well, during World War II, the richest Americans said, no, we'll give you 95 pennies out of every dollar I make after my $2 millionth dollar, say, and we're gonna afford to defeat Hitler, because guess what? There will be no America if we don't defeat Hitler. And this sticks all the way through the 1950s at 90%. This is Dwight Eisenhower, one of the most, and Harry Truman, two of the more popular presidents, right? Who keep the tax rate really high on the super rich to help rebuild America, to rebuild Western Europe, to give the United States the advantage in the Cold War, okay? And it works, and America becomes the most powerful country in the world, the strongest economy in the world during these years, really on the back of the ultra rich. Thank you, ultra rich, for making America great. And then we're going to see that in the mid-60s, okay, they start to lower it. I think Kennedy lowers it to 70%. So that means that 70 pennies out of every dollar you make after your $2 millionth dollar still goes to the federal government, where it takes that money and it does stuff like build freeways and schools. Taft was built in the 60s. Medicare and Medicaid for low-income people. For the old, we take care of our people. America is the shining country. NASA and the moon landings, and all of these things are being done in the 60s, 70s, all the way until 1980. And here's where our book picks up. In 1980, America flips the tax code on its head and starts experimenting with taxes, and things have never been the same economically for the United States. And we'll explain why. Also, you can see that during World War II, corporations stepped up. Remember, corporations are not mama and papa's businesses. This is not, a small company on Topanga. All right, this is the richest companies in America. These are Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, and ExxonMobil. They stepped up and they were paying 50% also. So we see that the rich and the richest companies together put our country on their back, got us through World War II, got us the big advantage in the Cold War. We built our country and the world and made us the world leader we are today. Thank you, corporations. And because of that, we have money to buy your stuff. Because of that, there is an America. Thank you. That was good of you. But in 1980, again, we're going to see this dramatic change take place. And this is where we're going to really, the bulk of our lesson is going to come from. In 1981, President Reagan began a 40-year trend of dramatically cutting taxes on the top income bracket. This is called supply-side economics. And the idea is that if the rich pay less taxes, they'll make more money and they'll start more businesses, and that will expand businesses, and that will help create more jobs. And in the 1970s, there were job shortages. It could have had to do with the high interest rate that banks were charging businesses to borrow money to start a business. But this was his theory, okay? Interestingly, in 1979, when future Vice President and future President George H.W. Bush, George Bush the first, runs against Reagan for president, he calls this voodoo economics. He says this is make-believe, it's not real, you're just making stuff up. And the richest Americans are going to get crazy rich, and the poor people are going to get poor. And at first, he cuts the top income tax from 50%, from 70% to 50% for a few years. This was dramatic. The US government had to start borrowing money at a record pace to pay its bills. And then something unheard of happened. He did a one-time tax cut that only lasts for like 3 years, because it couldn't have lasted. It would never have worked. And he lowers the top income bracket to 29%. And in Ronald Reagan's 8 years as president, our national debt triples. The amount of money that we owe as a country triples in those years. All right, so take a look at this chart. This is our national debt from 1791, when our country started. Look, there's no debt. All the way until today. What? Who's going to pay that? Oh yeah, it's you, the students, and me. I still got some years left to work. My wife just started a career. She'll be working for the next 25 to 30 years. Yeah, I'm chipping in, dudes. I'm part of it. But look at that. Starting in 1981, the debt triples. Okay, and it has just been going up ever since. There's this teeny little break right here. Do you see it? When Clinton was president. But it has been right here. This is actually, the red is the debt. This is when Clinton was president. Clinton actually, we're going to find out, balances the budget and saves money for 4 straight years. And then, you see what happened. So this debt thing that's been going on in our country started right here in 1981. And we went from, I don't know what this number is, less than $1 billion debt, or maybe less than $1 trillion debt, all the way up to over $3 trillion debt in Ronald Reagan's presidency, because he stopped taxing the rich during this period. And his predecessor, George W. Bush, kind of George Bush the first kind of raises taxes back up a little bit in his term, okay? And then here is Clinton, where he raises it all the way up to about 39.6%, a tad below 40. George Bush II lowers it back down. Obama raises it back up. Okay, this is kind of where we're at. Let's take a look and see now about our yearly borrowing. So hold on, let's now follow the book for a second. So in 1993, Clinton raises the top bracket to 40%. In 97, though, he lowers capital gains taxes, the amount of money people pay on investments. So he raises taxes on people, but then lowers taxes on the investors. Bush then raises taxes again on the top 1% mostly, and he turns huge. Well, his last year in office was the Great Recession. We had to borrow 1.8 trillion to pay our bills. That's the most we ever had to borrow, but that was the Great Recession also. It was an emergency, kind of like the World War II and World War I emergencies, right? We borrow in emergencies. Okay, I think we get it. But we shouldn't be borrowing when times are good. That's the theory, right? The idea is, the government has to borrow money in emergencies to get us through them. But when times are good, we shouldn't be borrowing money. We should be saving money, right? And then Obama's going to raise the income taxes on the top 1%. He's going to cut our borrowing from 1.8 trillion down to 600 billion. When I say down to 600 billion, does that sound weird to me, or to you also, or is it just me? Okay, let's look at this. This is our deficit ever since Reagan took over. So when Reagan took over, we were borrowing less than 100 billion a year to pay our bills. And he raised that every year, up, till we got over $200 billion to pay our bill. This is all these years in a row of borrowing. Here's Daddy Bush the first, lowers our borrowing percentage. He tries to get it back down. And then you can see it kind of balloons back up. And then here is Clinton. Clinton raises taxes. We stop borrowing, and we have 4 straight years, or 3 straight years, 3.5, of saving money. We're saving money now. We're paying down the debt. And then Bush II takes over, and Bush II has this huge tax cut. We get attacked on September 11th. We go into 2 wars that were, let's not talk about them. And we're borrowing. Boom, Great Recession hits. Oh my gosh, can you believe what this is? It's the most borrowing we've ever done in the history of our country. It's crazy that we did that until the COVID. And then the COVID borrowing has been even higher. I guess it's the stimulus. And then Obama takes over, and Obama raises taxes just a smidge on the upper 1%. You see it cut, all the way down. We're borrowing less. And then boom, Trump takes over. And what does Trump do? We start borrowing again. This does not have Trump's last 2 years, which the COVID happened. And that's an emergency too. Okay, well, the financial situation we've been in since the COVID is an emergency as well. We need to acknowledge that. And we can't say it was, So we're going to look at these Trump numbers, and we're not going to look at the COVID emergency numbers because they're unrealistic, because emergencies come and the government steps up and helps people as they should. Okay, but you can see clearly that when taxes are high on the rich, the government doesn't borrow as much. And when taxes are low on the rich, the government borrows more. Low, high. Low on the rich, kind of low, higher on the rich. Trump cuts taxes. We borrow more. You can't argue with facts, folks. Okay, this is just the simple reality of the situation. Now the question is, well, when the rich are paying less in taxes, are they helping the economy? Does it work, right? Reagan tripled our borrowing and stuff, right? Did it help? Well, yeah, I mean, it did during Reagan's years, right? You can see that there was great economic growth during the Reagan years. he cut the top percentage from 70% to 29%. It was cut by 3 times. And although he has some struggles at the beginning, oftentimes we can look back at the former president's economy. Maybe Carter was partially responsible for this. Reagan had some great years, okay, economically, but he also had to borrow tremendously to have these great years economically, right? He tripled our national debt. It's never happened before. And then we see some fall off during the Bush years. And then this is Bush the first. And then Clinton takes over. He raises taxes and the economy grows incredibly. What? But I thought raising taxes was going to hurt the economy, but he balances the budget and has 4 straight years of budget surplus while growing the economy at near record numbers. And then when Bush cuts taxes, Bush the second now, it shrinks the economy? What? Wait a minute. I thought cutting taxes on the rich was supposed to create more jobs and grow the economy. No. Maybe it does a little bit, but it never gets up to Clinton levels, who had raised taxes on the rich. And then the Great Recession hits during Bush's years, and the economy shrinks dramatically. Obama raises taxes again, and the economy goes back up. What? And it's not at Clinton levels. It may be equal to Bush, when you balance it all out. And then Trump takes over, and Trump cuts taxes on the rich, and the economy is almost the exact same as Obama's during the growth years. I mean, if you look at the economic growth during his years, 2.9 being the highest of Obama and Trump, 2.5, 2.6, Trump 2.2, 2.3. But he cut taxes on the rich and on corporations. Okay. So you use your brain on that one and figure it out on your own. And again, you guys, this is what most elections hinge on, is the state of the economy, is your belief in whether or not you should agree with the Republicans who want to cut taxes on the rich and cut government spending, or you agree with the Democrats who want to raise taxes on the rich and keep government spending at current levels. Now, there are outside factors. COVID was an outside factor, but that's not really in here. The September 11th is an outside factor. So maybe this little drop off right here, well, no, that was actually not 2001. This would be 2001. There are also other factors that come into play. I mean, look, the Clinton years was the beginning of the internet. So there was some great growth there. But I mean, the numbers kind of speak for themselves here. We're going to do one more thing. All right. I'm about to show you the single scariest thing you should ever see in your lives for young people who are watching this. This is our national debt. Yep, that's $28 trillion. I can barely even say those words. Makes me want to cry. $28 trillion for our federal government. Now our state government is doing much better. We've been saving money. California's been doing fine. $28 trillion. There's all sorts of really interesting things in this website. We can look at things like how much of the debt is held by foreign countries, how much of it is held by China itself, our population, unemployment numbers. These are really fun to go through. I suggest that you take a look at it. This is our corporate taxes. This is our income taxes. This is our tariff taxes. This is our state revenue, and how much money is in the Social Security, how much money or how much money is being spent in Social Security, how much money is being spent in Medicare, how much money is being spent in defense. All these things are really interesting. But here's where I want to spend my time. The historic debt clock. Because in 2016, before President Trump took over, our national debt was 19. We've added $9 trillion over the last 5 years. Let's keep going back, shall we? Come on. Mm, How about in Obama's middle of his term? 15, okay, so in his 4 years, last 4 years, we added 4 trillion, we've added 9 trillion in the last 3 years. How about before Obama took over in the Bush years? 10 trillion, okay, so the Great Recession, okay, that we probably borrowed a little more, so Obama added 5 trillion. Okay, let's keep looking back. How about in the middle when Bush was running things before the Great Recession? 7 trillion, okay, so we borrowed 3 trillion in Bush's last 4 years to pay the bills there. And then understand inflation is a big part of this, right? Inflation is always there. How about before Bush? 5 trillion, okay, so Bush's first 4 years, he only borrowed $2 trillion to pay the bills. Okay, wait a minute. This is weird though. What's happening to the national debt in this one? It's going backwards because before Bush under Clinton, that's right, we were saving money. Our national debt was actually shrinking. Let's keep looking backwards in time. Let's go 10 years back. Let's go back to George Bush the first. How much did we owe? 3 trillion. So in 10 years, mostly under Clinton, we only had to borrow $2 trillion to pay the bills. And in the last 4 years, they were borrowed 9 trillion to pay the bills. That is weird. How let's keep looking back. 1980 before Reagan took over. Oh my gosh, we only owe $880 billion as a country. Each citizen only owed $4,000 on average. One more time, let's just look at today. How much do each one of us owe? I don't have that much money. And who's going to pay that? You. The you. You are, kids. And me, and my wife, my daughters. And who's not going to pay it? The retirees. The people who are in charge right now who are making these laws, yeah. Yeah. The last thing I'm going to say, and I'm going, I had a student teacher in here from UCLA a few years ago. He's a really great guy. We were buddies. He was an economics major. I'm a history major, but I do economics. I tried to learn 21 years. And he tells me the greatest threat to our country is not any war, it's not anything except ourselves. Because if this debt gets too out of control, and they stop letting us borrow money, this would be the biggest threat to our country, in his opinion. And I know we're in the middle of an emergency right now. We're just trying to pull out of this horrible COVID situation. It's a once every 100 years problem. We have a president who's out there trying to spend more to get the economy going and create more jobs. And he wants to raise taxes on the rich to pay for a lot of these programs that he's talking about. Are these good ideas? I don't know. But you better have an opinion on this because it impacts you for the next 45 years of your life, your working life. Choices you make and we make as a country are going to make those decisions. And young people vote at the lowest percentage. So if you guys chose to all vote, you could change things. You could push us in one direction or the other. I hope you vote. I do.